Let's go on a bit of a journey of understanding how does each stage work in the programme.
OK, we've got the stages listed up here on the screen. The first one, obviously, is to pick up the phone and call to make a referral. We are taking phone-based referrals, but ultimately we'll be moving towards web-based and fax-based referrals as well. We are expecting that providers will see a significant demand in this program and that we may well get a lot of referrals. So we're asking that referrers take certain basic steps before they reach out and pick up the phone to make a referral. The first of those, of course, is to try and form a sense in your own minds as to whether those three key eligibility criteria are met. If you are picking up the phone to make a referral, perhaps asking yourselves the question, are these behaviours primarily related to dementia? Are they really towards the severe and very severe end of the spectrum that would warrant a placement in an SDCP? And have we actually given adequate management a decent go? Have we involved a specialist service or a specialist dementia behaviour management provider in trying to settle these behaviours down? Are they really severe and long-standing? It's quite possible to have very severe and very acute dementia-related behaviours that are only there for a couple of weeks. Now, in that circumstance, it most likely reflects a delirium, and as Anne mentioned, people can move up and down amongst the tiers. We wouldn't expect that a behavioural disturbance that's only been there for a couple of weeks, regardless of how severe it might be, would be eligible for an SDCP eligibility assessment. So asking those internal questions at the point of referral prior to picking up the phone to make the call is what we'd ask of referrers. We'd also ask that prior to making a referral, the referrer actually touches base with the next of kin or authorised decision maker in relation to the person who's being considered for referral and obtains consent for that referral to go ahead. Our entire assessment process is really quite detailed, quite time-consuming, and there's no point in making a referral for an assessment if the authorised decision maker in relation to the person being referred has not given permission for that process to go through. So talking to the families, talking to the guardians, talking to the authorised decision makers about what an SDCP is, what the assessment process consists of, and the pros and cons of considering placement within an SDCP is really a necessary first step in addition to those eligibility criteria before picking up the phone. So that's the first part, Colm. The second stage in the process is once you've ticked those mental boxes to make the referral and talk to one of our triage workers. The triage process will ask of referrers a series of questions to try and satisfy in the minds of the triage worker whether those three criteria are met, whether the behaviours are dementia-related primarily, whether they fall at the severe or very severe end of the spectrum, and whether a specialist service provider has had a go at managing the behaviours that are causing the referral, the extent to which the provider has been able to actually implement those management suggestions, and if they pass those hurdles, we'd then consider proceeding to a formal assessment process as distinct from a triage process. At that stage, once triage has been complete, we'll be asking referrals to send through to us a range of documents, which we'll talk about in a later slide, I believe, that really will help DSA in our assessment. So it's always important to know what has been tried and what the behaviours are in some detail, so things like behaviour charts, medication charts, copies of old specialist letters or hospital discharge summaries that have occurred within the last 3 months, for example. They're probably the most relevant, as well as sending through copies of the consent information that confirms to us that we have actually received permission from the authorised decision maker to go out and perform the eligibility assessment. Once we've passed through the triage phase, the assessment phase actually occurs. That's the point where a trained clinician or consultant from DSA will go out and assess the person being referred at the point of referral. So whether the person's living at home, as the question earlier illustrated, whether they're in residential care or whether they're currently in an acute or subacute hospital environment, the assessment there will occur on-site, face-to-face with one of our trained assessors, whose who will be going out basically to verify on the basis of the source documents held by the referrer whether those eligibility criteria are met. So we'll have been told a variety of things during triage. We'll be going out during the assessment process to verify what we've been told. And again, it comes down to determining that those 3 core eligibility criteria are met. So we're hoping that the standards of documentation that both acute health and residential care can provide are sufficient to be able to justify the referral as well. Once the assessment process has been conducted, and as I say, these are quite onerous assessments, they'll probably take about half a day on site to determine eligibility, another half day to consider the report. Each report on eligibility that our consultants produce will then be discussed with one of our senior medical staff. So a geriatrician, a psycho-geriatrician employed by DSA for that purpose. I would be included in that process as well. So we'd hope that medical specialists are probably the gold standard of determining eligibility. I might be wrong in that. Anyway, so every approval or determination of ineligibility will be discussed with a medical specialist who will have the final say. If there is a determination made that on the basis of the evidence provided the person is eligible, then the eligibility information will be transferred to the SDCP provider. Now, although initially there's going to be a limited number of SDCP providers, there will ultimately be a network of them, and people who provide the consent for the assessment will have the freedom to nominate which facility they would prefer to go in for family and carer reasons. So that's all transparent at the level of the person providing consent. The role of DSA, though, in the process really finishes once we've made that eligibility assessment. We then pass the information on to the Clinical Advisory Committee of the SDCP provider, and it's the Clinical Advisory Committee who ultimately will determine which person who has been deemed eligible will be admitted into the next available bed. And they take into account in such decisions their current resident mix, who's going to be the best fit within our current environment and so forth. So we can try and best match the people referred not only to an appropriate environment but to an appropriate resident mix. So it won't be a waiting list as such, but there will be a pool of people that the Clinical Advisory Committee will have access to at any one time who they can select from to be the next person into the program when a bed becomes available.
And you've touched on the fact that it's currently a paper-based format that we use, but clearly that touches on the fact that, and we're in a journey here where this process is one that we'll learn from and develop further as we have in the DSA program itself.
Absolutely. As Steve said, I mean, initially at the moment we've got one provider, so it's easy to do a paper-based process for one provider, but, you know, in a few years' time we hope to have 35 specialist dementia care facilities up and running, and might be time to review processes, but for now it is paper-based. Yeah.
And certainly that was reflected, if we think of in October 2016 when the DSA programme came under the lead provider model, that primarily we were receiving a lot of fax-based referrals. Today that's primarily electronic.
Emails.
So you could anticipate, Steve, I guess, that over time there will be parts of these processes as we learn what the right fit is for the programme that we will develop them further.
Any new program is a bit of a work in progress, Colm. Yes, we will be using the rollout of these first SDCP facilities pretty much as road testing the process, and we can certainly anticipate that refinements will be made to both the eligibility and assessment and triage processes as we learn from those early experiences.